Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Karen. Let's see. What month are we in? I think we're in July. So in August, you can look for me at the Portland, Maine Comedy Festival. In October, you can see me in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I'm sure there's more. But whatever. Give me 5 stars if you can on iTunes or wherever you listen. That helps people find the podcast. And karenrontowski.com or paranormalkaren.com. All good. All y'all know where to find me. Today's guest, I met in Illinois. That's how I say it. John, is that all right if I put the noise at the end?
Well, okay.
Okay. And I did a gig. It was way south. It was a great little club. Where the hell was I, John?
You were in Mason City, at Mason City Limits.
Mason City Limits. And this is what I like to do. I like my Facebook friends to keep track of where I was. I was at Mason City Limits, which is a great little club if you are in that area. And that's where I met John and his friend. And you guys took me to the Lincoln Theater, and I had the best time. Thanks for coming on the show. John Winterbauer joins me. John, how are you?
I'm good, Karen. Thanks for having me.
And you, how is your weather there? Well, it's going to be July, so ignore that question. So I'm going to get right to it because not only do you know, you give great tours. You give me that fantastic tour of the theater. I have my book right here. But you do the Decatur haunted tours, correct?
Haunted Decatur, yes.
Haunted
Decatur, Illinois.
Okay. And what, well, let's start here. What got you involved in the paranormal?
Oh, the same as everybody else. The legend of Boggy Creek got me into Bigfoot. And
okay.
That led me to UFOs.
Already stopped. Legend of Boggy Creek. You already got one. I don't know. What's the legend of Boggy Creek?
Oh, it's back in, I can't remember the exact year, but in Fouke, Arkansas, they were having a series of Bigfoot sightings, and a man named Charles Pierce made a film that's almost a documentary. It's a B-grade horror film, but it's almost a documentary style. That they showed a lot at the drive-ins back in the day, and I caught that as a part of a double feature. My parents took me to a drive-in. I don't know what the first one was, but the Boggy Creek monster got me, and I lived in this little town surrounded by woods, so I became obsessed with Bigfoot, and that led to UFOs and ghosts and monsters, and I just like weird stuff. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, you have to get out of the everyday life. So Boggy Creek Monster, that's a movie, that's like a documentary?
The Legend of Boggy Creek. It's not a documentary per se, but it's kind of filmed that way. Okay. It's got a very realistic thing. It's a great movie. It's an old one. I don't remember what year it came out, in the 70s.
Wonderful. Okay. So you already started us out with a movie. Okay. So you got interested in everything. And did you live in Decatur?
No, I lived in a town called Athens, which is north of Springfield, Illinois. So right in the center of Illinois, out in the country. And that's where I grew up.
Okay. So you moved to Decatur. I don't know what happened. Maybe you were asked.
No, I've never lived in Decatur. Actually, I live in Springfield now, but I just work in Decatur. And I came to those tours because my friend Troy Taylor wrote a book called Haunted Decatur back in 91. And then he and our buddy Skip Houston started a tour in 1993. And when Skip retired from doing them, I stepped in and I think this is my 19th year.
Wow.
It's the tour's 26th year and my 19th, I think.
Wow. Okay. So what makes Decatur, tell us what would entice us to go on your tour in Decatur. Is it just great? Well, Lincoln is from there. Abe Lincoln, correct?
He's from Springfield, but he does have some Decatur ties, yes.
Okay. So he haunts Decatur a little bit. In Wyoming, there is an enormous bust of Lincoln that like leans over the freeway. Like it's the freakiest thing. And it's just like his neck up. And it's the creepiest thing ever. I went out there because Atlas Obscura shows the picture of it. And I was thinking, was Wyoming there when Abe Lincoln was a president?
I'm pretty sure it wasn't a state at that point. No.
Okay.
But, we can have Lincoln everywhere. I'm like, right now, I'm about 6 blocks from his tomb. So I'm all for Lincoln. Lincoln can be everywhere.
Okay. So he can hear us talking now. Okay. Yeah. So tell us some of the hauntings that go on in Decatur.
Well, Decatur goes back to the 1830s. And I'm a firm believer that you can't have hauntings without history. So you can go all the way back to the violent pioneer times. The first buildings they built there were a jail and a bar. So, I mean, it tells you a lot about that town.
Okay.
And there's a long history of violence all the way up to the Prohibition era where they were blowing each other up and, stabbing each other in the streets. And all that leaves its mark. And some of that contributes to the hauntings there.
It's like Van Nuys right now, the stabbings in the jail and the bar. Perfect. I know it's right where I am. Sure.
Well, there you go. There's a lot of Native American burial grounds out there that the pioneers came in and saw these sacred lands as really choice real estate. So they built a city on top of them. Which is bad mojo. Everybody's seen Poltergeist. You don't want to do that.
Right.
So they built a city on top of a lot of that, and that's left its mark behind too. And then some of the places we visit have just had events happen that have caused them to become haunted. So it's you mentioned the theater. It's you've thousands and thousands of people have passed through the doors of that theater, which is now closed, but all of that's still there, intangibles. So it plays itself out from time to time.
Well, now you, because I personally believe all 3 theaters are haunted, period.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For whether it's something that's bored and would like to watch a show, or artists, actors, they have that very strong, persistent energy that may stay around, or a lot of times it's, I feel like it's stagehands or somebody that just enjoyed watching. But I feel like those seats are full usually even when they're not.
Yeah, I would agree.
And in that theater, you had some particular ghosts that you were that actually reacted to you, didn't you?
Well, I've had, I think out of all the places I've visited, and I've been to a whole lot of haunted places, that one has actually given me more to work with than anywhere. And like I say, it's not accessible anymore, and that is sad. But the first time I ever saw anything that I know for a fact was a ghost was at that theater. And that was at 6 a.m. We had an event there that day, and I had to be there. And it was in like February, so really cold and snowing, and the other guys weren't there yet, or at least that I could see. So I was pressed up against the windows, looking in, trying to see if anybody was in there. And someone walked out as a man, walked out of the bathroom area, across the lobby, and up the stairs that go into the mezzanine. And I was pounding on the door, trying to get his attention, and it was nobody. There was no one in the building.
Wow.
It was only when the other guys came down and we went in, and then I walked around the building and there was nobody there. That's when it hit me that, oh, God, I just saw one.
Wow. And that reason, was that I know this might be details you weren't thinking at the time because you're looking in the window, but was it transparent, or it looked really like a person, or was it dressed to 18th century, or just usher on its way?
Well, it was at the back of the lobby where it was kind of dark. So I didn't get a lot of detail. It looked more like it would have been a patron. They weren't wearing like the old ushers uniforms or anything. It seemed solid enough, but then again, I was looking through tinted glass. Mm-hmm. So I could have had some difficulty discerning whether, how clear it was, but it was very clearly a man. and walked up the stairs and just ignored me pounding on the wall, on the window. And that was the first time I ever saw a ghost. I'd been interested in them. Ghost came to me late because I was into Bigfoot and UFOs and all that. And the ghost thing kind of came along because I was working at a place. It has to remain undisclosed. I can't tell you where. But I was working at this place that we heard footsteps and things like that a lot. Because I wrote them off as whatever, old building. But then one night I was there by myself, and we had motion lights, motion detectors that would set, you'd break the laser and set off.
Right. And this is in the place. This was where you were working, right? Not the theater.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Not the theater. This was a few years before that theater. But one night I was there by myself, and something triggered all those motion detectors and turned the lights on. And these things would trigger little voice little recordings that would play. And so I had these voices chiming in this big empty room. And I went, well, there might be something to this.
It's amazing when it gets quiet how much louder those suspicious noises get, isn't it? But it sounds like everything just went on.
Yeah. I mean, I had locked myself in. My keys, in fact, were hanging in the front door of the building all the way across this big room. And I could actually hear, the like it triggered the voice activated thing, the come on in message that we played. And, someone will be right with you. That chimes up and I'm like, what the hell?
Wow.
I walked out there, and then it got real cold. It was August, and so hot in central Illinois. It got real cold, and I kind of panicked and ran out, and I lived across the street. And then I was sitting on the porch watching the lights flick off and on.
Wow.
Then I realized I'd left my keys in the door, so I had to go back.
Wow.
That was an unnerving experience, but that's what got me started looking into ghosts. Really, that's what convinced me that ghosts were real. It was about, 3 years later when I had that experience at the theater. That's the first time I ever saw one. And I've been doing this now, give or take 25 years. And I think I can safely say I've seen probably 4 ghosts in all the time I've been doing this. But when you see them, they're really there. There's no doubt about
and
it.
it is rare people think when you go ghost hunting, you just see a full body apparition. They are very rare. And I think even for the spirit to come through as a full body apparition, I think that's very hard for them too.
Yeah, I think it takes a whole lot of energy for them to do that.
Now, in this place, because that sounds almost a little quite powerful to be a human spirit, if it's really turning on lights and on and off, and that sounds very strong.
Well, the lights are motion activated. So what it was doing was moving through the room, and it was activating those lights, which tells me, and here we go, this is all about theory, which is all we've got to go on, but it tells me it had some kind of presence to it because it had to trigger it's lasers,
Right.
So they had to break that beam, but the lights were kicking on, and I'm like standing there at the back of the room watching this happen and just going, okay, I'm freaked out. Because my only way out was through that room. I had to go through it.
Yeah. Did you ever go through that when you're scared like that and just talk or sing so there's some noise in the room?
Subsequently, that's the only time I've really, I'm not afraid to say that's the only time I was really scared by any of this. And in all these years later, I've spent nights. I've spent nights in the Villisca Axe murder house, and I've been in prisons, and I've been in all these places, and nothing's really scared me. I've been startled. But walking through like the theater, when I used to go in the theater all the time, we'd take the tours in there, and I'd go in first and talk to them and try to get them to react. One night
before we get to the theater, I want to ask you one question. In the place you were working, did you find out any history about that place, or it just was a one and done?
Well, no, it was, I wish I could tell you where it was. It was a museum, and it's an old building dating back to the 1830s. And we had, photographs of people involved and things like that. And we had several people come through that were just visitors that had never been there before, who said we had a ghost in the building. And that got me kind of interested before that ever happened, because we'd hear footsteps and things. but we had like 3 different people over the course of about 5 years, not at one time, and spread out pretty significantly. They didn't know each other. All reported the same guy in the same place, and 2 of them gave me a name. Huh. And oddly enough, the last one, I'd put this book together with all these pictures in it, and I said, "Would you know him if you saw him?" And she said, "Yeah." So she's flipping through this book, and she stops at this guy, and she'd given me the name Henry, and so she's flipping through the book, and she stopped at this guy and said, "That's your guy right there, and his name is Henry." So, and there's another one there that, Henry seems to be okay, but there's another one there that isn't so nice.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've had encounters with him. I've never seen anything there. I've heard some good EVPs there.
And I know you can't say where it is, but it sounds like there was older objects there. So it could be the object or the place or whatever.
Well, the history of it tells me that an old German guy owned it for a while as a general store. And I think he's the guy that's mad. That doesn't want me. I'm German. I can.
I know. I was going to say a mad German. That sounds about right. I'm a German too.
Yeah, no nonsense, and doesn't want people screwing around in his building. I mean, he wasn't evil. He was just kind of grumpy. And Henry is definitely tied to the building. His dad built it. Oh. So I mean, it was really odd to me that this lady got 2 of them got the name, but this lady picked the picture out. That's him. So,
and were these people necessarily psychics or mediums, or they must have been somewhat in touch?
Well, they didn't claim to be. They just saw him. Wow. There was another time we had this little girl came in. She and her dad. She was interested in the place, and she went upstairs. And before they were only up there a minute, and she started screaming. And I thought, oh my, she fell through the glass on a display or something. I didn't know what had happened. And I started going up the stairs, and they come running down. He's carrying her. She's bawling. And she said they were looking at this display, and someone started stroking her hair. Oh. And she was about 8, young girl. And I said, well, that's probably Henry. And Henry's okay. He probably just thought, what a pretty little girl and whatever. And he doesn't mean any harm. And she would not go up there again. She was done. And she'd wanted to visit this place for like a year before she got the chance. She was all excited when she came in, and wow. It was, I had to go yell at him after that. You got to leave kids alone, man. Don't you feel like there is something about hair? They very much like to touch hair. That's a very common thing with ghosts. Yeah. I've never had one touch mine, but yeah. Yeah, you don't want to ghost hunt with a bald guy. Just kidding. Yeah. But there is something about that they do go for the hair. So there's the history there. So now, actually, you know what? I know we're early in. Let me take a break real quick, and then we're going to come back and talk about the theater, because there was some stuff that you were telling when I was there that I thought was fascinating. All right, hold on one second. I have a new favorite thing. It's my ring from Copper Case Jewelry. I did a show in Colorado, met a wonderful young man named Casey who told me he made crystal jewelry. So I'm in. That's all I had to hear. He makes raw crystal jewelry using copper electroformulist techniques. Do I know what that means? No. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing those words correctly. All I know is I love the final product. It has become my favorite ring. And I know you're thinking, crystal ring, that sounds kind of clunky and sharp. Is it going to be heavy, or is it going to get caught on my sleeve every time I put my coat on? Absolutely not. It is the most delicate, perfect size ring. I even wear it through yoga, and it's uncomfortable to wear jewelry in yoga. Not this. You got to check out Casey's pieces. Go to @29 Copper Case on Instagram, and you can see all his new work. You can also email him if you want something special at 29coppercase@gmail.com. Check it out. I know you're going to love it. Okay, I'm here with John Winterbauer from Haunted Decatur Tours, and we're talking about the Lincoln Theater, which I went into with you. And you said you used to go in, and you really had a rapport with the ghosts in that theater. Well, all of us did. I mean, there was a staff, a small staff, and we were in there a lot. And we've been in there for years. And like I say, it's closed now and probably won't reopen, but
Is the building still there?
The building is still there. So, I mean, there's hope. There's people that are still actively trying to make it happen, but I don't know how that's going. But I was involved in that theater before I was doing the ghost hunting stuff. Before I was doing Haunted Decatur, I was involved in that theater. And so there's a 20-year history there too. And the theater was built in 1916. So you've seen it. It's one of those big, huge, vaudeville theaters. Three, a floor and a balcony and a mezzanine.
And a huge ceiling. Yeah. The whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, everybody played there. Decatur at that time was a really happening place, and tons of people played there. Bob Hope and Al Jolson and just Harry Blackstone. For those of you that are Magic fans, that's the theater that Blackstone emptied when it caught fire. He made all the kids disappear from the theater. That's a very famous story in Magic circles.
What is that story?
Well, he was having a matinee for a bunch of kids, so the theater's full of children. And the building next door caught fire. The Rambo Pharmacy caught fire. And they came and told him, you need to evacuate the building. And, of course, he's looking at all these kids and knows if he screams fire, all hell's going to break loose. So he tells the kids, okay, I'm going to do this trick for you, but it's too small. We have to go outside to do it. So just, stand up and then one by one, just make your way out the exits. Follow the ushers. And within like 15 minutes, he had the theater empty. And, they had to stay out there while they put the fire out. And then he could come back in and finish his show. But he later told, he was on TV and he said, the greatest trick I ever did was making 1,000 kids disappear from the Lincoln Square Theater. So that's a very famous story in Magic circles. Oh, okay. And that's that theater. So if David Copperfield's listening and wants to throw some money out,
he can take care of the theater. That's right.
There you go.
I was just with someone that knew him, and it's like he has so much money right now. It's ridiculous. Like he just has planes and like an airport at his house or something.
Well, Copperfield's collecting magic, I assume, to turn into a museum at some point. So he's saving a lot of that history. So, David, if you're listening, get a hold of me.
Yeah.
We can talk. But that theater has a litany of ghosts, but we can only identify one of them, and we're not even sure
who it is.
That guy is correct. But the long-standing legend was there was a guy named Red who was a stagehand, and he fell to his death from the ceiling and tore his arm off midway down, hitting the pin rail on the where they tied the ropes off. And that wasn't true at all. There was a guy named Red, and his nickname was Red. His real name was Roy Faulkner, and he died at home after an illness. And but he loved that place, and he came back, as far as we can tell. We've had all kinds of encounters with him, or a ghost that we believe to be him, including my buddy Adam White, who does the tours with me. Was on an MTV show because he was addicted to caffeine or whatever, and they were filming him around just his regular life. So they took him to the theater, and he was explaining the history and telling the stories, and he hadn't mentioned Red. And they had an ovulus sitting there, and it just started going red, 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 red.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm like, there he is. And it freaked them out, and they left. And not Adam and Jake, but the MTV crew bolted. So,
that's hysterical that scared them. It's funny. The stagehand falling is, I think that's an urban legend that all theaters have.
Maybe.
There's always a stagehand that something terrible happened to. Was trampled by a horse in the back or something. It's always the stagehand. But also, so you have some other ones. You have any darker or any that are not so friendly at the theater?
Nobody was too mad about anything. Some of them were pranksters. And again, you didn't see them too often. But they did some odd things. Now, we had some bands there, and I'm sworn to secrecy, and you're going to put this on the internet. I can't say who it was, but let's just say a well-known band performed there, and he was the lead singer was in the shower downstairs, and someone opened the shower curtain, and no one was there.
Oh, funny.
He came flying up into the lobby, and using rock and roll language that I can't say on the radio.
Oh, you can swear on here. We're very.
Oh, okay. Well, he just came storming up the lobby. What the fuck's going on in your basement?
That's funny. Well, you know
screaming. And I said, well, that was a zealous fan. That's what that was.
Well, I would think with that kind of a vibration, I've always wondered if when you went into a haunted place, and you don't want to aggravate, I'm not one of those people that aggravates, but I wondered if you put speakers that, like, for example, I cannot stand when cars have that heavy boom, that bass that you feel in your car. I always wonder if that kind of a sound would actually create some activity where, like, they were feeling that on the other side or whatever. And that to me sounds like the shower thing. Like, what? Stop it. You know what I mean? That you're too loud.
Well, this was afterward. I mean, after the show, he was just cleaning up, but it was hysterical. I mean, that was funny. And I don't think that whoever that was meant any harm. That dressing room where he was, we've recorded children's voices down there. Now, I don't know why or who, but we've recorded children's voices.
Do you know? But the theater was kind of the first thing there, right?
Well, there's a hotel there.
Oh, okay. Before the theater?
The first thing that was there was a bar. So go figure that. It was a general store and a bar. And then they built this hotel, which burned down, and a few people died. And then they built the theater, and that's what's still there today.
See, when I hear children's voices, when you hear children's voices, and it's not necessarily a place that was for children, I always think that is a trickster. That is something that you absolutely cannot trust. Yeah.
And I mean, that's, again, it goes back to what do we have to work with, theory, and that's as sound as any other theory. That's the problem. I don't actually go out and investigate nearly as much as I used to, because to me, it's proven. I don't have to go prove it to myself. Right. And I'll never have definitive proof because it just isn't going to come. And that's okay. I like going to the places and studying their history, and I like talking to the people and hearing their stories, but I don't actually take all the gear and sit up all night and,
Right. I see. That's funny too. So I always think EVP is as good of a sure thing that we're going to get, because right now in this digital age, you cannot trust any picture, even if you took it yourself.
Correct.
So I always think EVPs are the one thing that you can really, if you want to show someone, that is the best proof we have.
Yeah, and that's about as good as we're going to get, because you can't do this scientifically and make them repeat things. And we were out. We took there's a cemetery indicator called Greenwood, and we had been asked by I don't know, I don't remember the name of the show. It was a local, like one of those antique roadshow things, and the host was a comedian that you probably know. I can't remember his name either. Hysterical. We took him on the tour, and we had a blast, and we ended up in Greenwood, and we had borrowed a FLIR from someone, and we're standing there in the cemetery at night, and Adam he flashes this thing across the cemetery, and across the road from us, sitting on a tombstone, is very clearly a person. You can see it. It's on the episode of the show, or the pictures are on the Haunted Decatur Tours Facebook page. And I walked over there, and there was nobody there, but they could see me and they could see him. And there's a picture of both of us, and there was no one on that tombstone.
And you said that was a flare?
A FLIR camera. Yeah. It was one of those firefighters used to find heat pockets and things.
Oh, okay. Got it. Oh, yeah. Like the kind of that takes the same picture as a Spectrum camera?
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Got it. Oh, those are interesting. That's interesting.
Now, see, that's a photograph that I was involved in. I was there. I was the one standing next to the tombstone that had someone sitting on it that I couldn't see, but there's a photo of the two of us. I can't offer that as proof because I couldn't get him to do it again. See, that's what bums me out, because that picture is real, but what are you going to do? That's why I kind of stopped investigating, and I just go and experience the places now.
That you just actually brought up, it's very funny because I'm taking a parapsychology course. So they have, it literally is working in the lab and getting things that are repetitive like that. But, that's why I think I'm going to do an episode on the Enfield haunting in England because all the books that I've read and heard on that, it really was like you were sitting there and the same people showed up. And I think that was the Warrens that that's all of a sudden a guy's talking, well, this is Harry. And he has the heavy English accent. And the other guy, and he goes, can you knock on the wall? And Harry's like, I can't because Bob tore my arm off. And it's like, and they said it was voices just like you were, it was the most, it was like a horror movie. Like it doesn't sound like anything matches that. And the pictures from it, which at that time probably could not be messed with like they can now, were pretty. And I think I'm going to do a story on that one because that sounds like the only one where you could same ghost, same place, speaking right at you.
Yeah, the Enfield horror or the Enfield haunting, pretty dramatic, probably legitimate, and yeah, that'd be a good idea for an episode. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do some investigation on that. So now when we were in the theater, though, also, you told us, were there times when somebody would turn the lights all the way off on the theater and then turn them all the way on?
Oh, that happened a lot. That happened all the time. Not all the time, but it happened frequently. And they'd bang on things. There was way up at the top of the theater was a platform, a metal platform where there were light fixtures. And they'd jump up and down on that from time to time. There was a night, the most dramatic night. And again, a lot of stuff happened on the tours because we were in there, and I think there's a combination of things happening there. First of all, I think we have a lot of residual energy in those places, but I think there's also some intelligent ones roaming around. And I think they were happy that we were in there because they would screw around with us. And one night at the end of the tours, we tended to turn the lights on so people could see the place. But I was finishing up the story and the lights just came on. Now, none of us were near the lights. Just like on cue, the lights came on, but none of us were anywhere near them to turn them on yet. And that to me was a sign that, okay, they know we're here, they know what we're doing, and they're going to interact with us. So that's why I went in and started to ask them every time I'd walk in, can you do something? Show us that you're here. And sometimes they would, and sometimes they wouldn't. Most of the time they wouldn't. But one night, an odd night, it was actually Halloween. We don't do very many Halloween tours because they're usually on a Tuesday night, but it was actually a Saturday night Halloween tour, last one of the season. Let me go back just to preface this. Picked up the group at another theater, and this lady before we got on the bus tells me, I'm a psychic and I'm going to tell you everything that goes on tonight. I went, yay,
Yeah.
I didn't figure she was. And about halfway through the tour, she's yelling at cars. We're on a bus, so she's yelling at cars and she's screaming about houses. And I finally told her, look, if you don't shut up, I'm throwing you off.
Oh, so she was just saying there's a ghost in that house and da-da-da-da.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And she was out of control. Well, she calmed down and we get to the theater, the theater was our next to last stop. And then we'd take them out to Hell's Hollow in the woods. But
all right, I'm writing that down because we're going to come back and talk about that. Okay.
Okay, we can do that. So we had a regular bus driver, and she never would go in the theater. She was scared of it. But I told her that night, you have to come in because this lady's going to freak out and it's going to be hysterical. So we go in. The bus
driver wouldn't come in. Okay.
Right. She was terrified. She'd normally just sit out in the bus. Well, that night she walked in, and sure enough, this psychic lady starts screaming like there's hundreds of them. Oh, my God. Shut up. So she was good. After we calmed her down, we go in, and I'm standing on the stage, and they're all sitting in the seats in front of me. And I had the ghost light on. So I had one light. And right in front of the stage was an orchestra pit. So, like an 8-foot drop or 6-foot drop.
And for people that don't know, ghost light is a light that's left on in theaters, and it's supposed to be for is it for to keep the ghosts there, or all theaters leave one light on through the night?
Either or. It actually started when they used to light those things with gas. They had to leave something burning so the gas that's why those lights were left on. But it became a tradition. And it depends on who you ask. It's either to ward off the ghost or to attract the ghost. And so it's just a theater tradition. But I had that light on, and this lady could see her. I could see her try. She wanted to say something so bad, and she was like chomping on her lips. And I finally said, "What?" And she said, "There's one on the stage behind you." And I turned around, and of course, there was nothing on the stage behind me, just the stage. And I said to the crowd, "Well, they know who we are, and if they want to make themselves known, they will." And I go back to telling stories. And then this guy, completely unrelated to this psychic woman out there, just screams, "What the hell is that?" And I turn around, and about 6 feet behind me is a guy standing there just watching me. And I became the first tour guide in American Hauntings to drop an F-bomb in front of the whole group. I turn around, and they're just all staring at me because he was there and then he wasn't. And they're all just staring at me. I said, "You all saw that?" And they all just went,
Yeah. Well, so then you had to give the psychic lady credit, huh?
Well, in that situation, yeah, I kind of did. I didn't turn the ghost light off, which I normally would do. I left it on the rest of the tour. And then I said, "Okay, we got one more stop, and we're going to take you to a place called Hell's Hollow." And they all went, "Nope, we're done." And that was the end.
I would say if you get one full body apparition out of a tour, you are done.
We've had 3 in the history of the tours. We've had 3 full body apparitions, and one was in Hell's Hollow. The other one was in the Avon Theater, which is still going strong, also built in 1916. And that's when Skip was doing the tours, and the guy was standing in the balcony. And when everybody saw him, they freaked out and ran for the doors, and the doors were all locked, so they were all smashed up against it. That was a fun night.
Well, okay, so now what is Hell's Hollow?
Hell's Hollow is an area of Decatur behind Greenwood Cemetery where the Sangamon River runs through. And it's undeveloped. There's a lake back there now, and there's a road. But for the most part, it's been undeveloped land for a really long time. And the stories go all the way back to the times when the Native Americans would come off the river and be murdered by the settlers. And so there's stories of river pirates, and there's stories of a gang called the Biscuit Necks. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but they called themselves the Biscuit Necks. This whole area was like a jungle, and it was a haven for criminals of all kinds. There were bootleggers back there, and there were murderers back there, and there was a big hobo camp, and there were grave robbers, and this whole thing. It's just a weird area, and it has changed a lot since those days. But
really, no more pirates?
No more pirates. and the Biscuit Necks were rounded up, and some of them were hanged, and they were left there. And that's one of the stories. In fact, we had a guy that used to work with us, and we'd tell that story about the guy that, they'd see this apparition hanging from a tree, and none of us really knew whether it was true or not. People just told the story, so we'd tell it, and it was a good atmospheric story. And one night we'd go down there, and every time we'd go down there, this guy would just kind of disappear into the woods. So he disappeared into the woods like he did. And seconds later, he's running for the bus. And when I got back, when I took everybody back, I said, he hands me the keys. He had the keys to the theater, and he hands them to me and says, "I'm done. I quit. I'm never doing this again." I said, "Why?" Well, he'd gone up there to use, the little boy's tree. And glanced to his left, and there was a guy hanging from the tree. And me and another guy went back down there, and there was nothing there. We didn't see anything, but he never did work for us again. And we paid him money just to tag along and make, he was security. So it was an easy gig, but, and he did it for years, but that was enough for him. He didn't want anything else to do with it.
Well, yeah, guys hanging from trees, again, like Van Nuys. Hang on one second.
I am not coming out to see you. You know this, right?
That's right. Van Nuys. Hang on one second, folks. We'll be right back. Psychic medium and buddy of mine, Terry Huberman, is with me today. Terry, you've given me so many great readings and healings, and now you've got everything together in one package. Tell me about that.
I sure do. So this package has energy healings, readings, and coaching.
Coaching, that's the best. And people, they buy the package. You give them coaching once a week?
Yeah, so we meet online once a week, and in between, there's support as well.
And who would this be for?
This is really for folks who are in indecision, needing to get into into their intuition because they're blocked or stuck. They need to move forward. And so we explore what the root causes of the problems are.
And helps them get out of their own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrific. And what can they expect from this?
Sure. So moving from anxiousness to confidence, accessing their freedom, joy, and security, and really being in alignment with themselves so they have that clear direction, so they know, aha, this is what I need to do next to reach my goals.
So now there's something that's free so people can talk to you and see if this is for them.
Yeah, absolutely. On my website, terryhuberman.com, there is a page where you can click, and it's the intuitive coaching package. And there is a button there that says schedule a free call. So you go ahead, schedule it. We'll get on a call and you can learn more about this program, and we'll see if this is a good fit for you or not.
See if there's chemistry.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's an odd date.
terryhuberman.com, TerrieHuberman. I highly recommend it, folks. So Hell's Hollow and the biscuit and the gravy game.
The biscuit next. Close enough. That sounds like a bad Don Knotts movie.
It does. The biscuit net gang. Oh, that's funny. All right. So when people take this tour, tell me some of the really interesting places that you go, or pick your favorite and tell me the history of that.
Well, my favorite now, because we can't go in the theater anymore. My favorite now is Greenwood Cemetery. Greenwood dates back to the earliest days of Decatur. It's where the movers and shakers of the town are buried. It's where there's like 60,000 burials there. So a wide variety of people. But we don't deal with anybody new. We go back in time a little bit. That place is home to the ever-present, the Greenwood Bride. All cemeteries have a bride ghost. This one's real. At least the story is historically accurate. I've never seen the ghost, but I've talked to a lot of people who have. And it's a girl that committed suicide because her fiance was a bootlegger and he got murdered. And she committed suicide not long after. And they buried her in her wedding dress. And that's all true. It's all right out of the newspaper.
Okay.
And then they've reported her ghost out there for years. I've never seen her, mostly during the day. Most sightings have been during the day of her. They also, the railroad that runs right past the cemetery ran to the Deep South. During the Civil War, they'd capture, POWs and take them up to Camp Douglas in Chicago. When people died on those trains, they would bury them wherever, whatever cemetery happened to be handy. They had a group of them that had died of yellow fever. And so they offloaded them there at Greenwood after a lengthy battle with the city. They didn't want them there, but they ended up there. And they buried them there in Greenwood on this hill. The problem with that is yellow fever, one of the symptoms was you slipped into a coma, and for all intents and purposes, you appeared dead. Well, these were privates in the Union Army. They weren't doctors. So they were convinced that they'd buried some of these people alive.
Ugh.
Well, they buried them on this rocky hill that they'd never used. And then a flood came out in the 1920s, 1927, I think, and washed them all down into the valley, washed all these graves out. So so it wiped out the back part of the cemetery. So they gathered these guys up and they buried them in two big trench graves, which are unmarked. I know where they are, but they were unmarked and they remain unmarked today. But they've now turned that hill into a Civil War veterans hill, which is a really weird, active place. I had taken a newspaper reporter who wanted to do a piece on the tours there. So it was me and three women.
But when you say a Civil War veterans, it's a side of a mountain, and they made it a Civil War veterans burial. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of those guys.
I was going to say which Civil War, but I think I know. Okay. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of Civil War guys buried there after the other guys were flooded out.
Yeah. So the Confederates are down along the bottom of the hill. Somewhere down there. Had a lot of weird experiences there. Well, in fact, one time talking about these trench graves, I know where they're at. So during one of the many supermoons, the really rare supermoons that seem to happen all the time now, we had permission to be out there and investigate. And it was me and another guy and these two girls. And I was walking around with the girls, and I knew that we were walking over the graves of these Confederates. So they were running EVP. They were running recorders. And so without telling them why, I just started quietly kind of singing Dixie. So we got out to the road and I said, play that back. So they play it back and you hear me very quietly, well, I wish I were in the land, and someone is whistling it. So someone literally was whistling Dixie with me.
Wow.
Yeah, there was no other men there. I took a newspaper reporter. I started to tell this. I took a newspaper reporter up there who wanted to do a piece on the tours, and her photographer was a girl, and there was another girl that came with them. So it's 3 women and me. And this is 20 years ago. And she's asking me all about ghost hunting, and she wanted all the terminology explained. And I was explaining how EVPs work to her. And there was an old cannon up there. So I was sitting on the cannon, and I said to her, well, theoretically, I would say something and they would answer me, or, that's what you hope for. And this was on a cassette. This is how far back this goes. It was on a cassette.
Okay.
So I spoke directly to these Union soldiers buried up there, and I said, well, I'm just going to rattle off some names, and if anybody sounds familiar, just give me a sign. Just tell me. So I just sat there and I said, Lincoln, Grant, whatever, Sherman, whatever I said. And I played it back for a minute, and of course there was nothing on it. And so that's how it works. So then I was driving home, and this is now midnight, and I have like this 45-minute drive. And I'm driving home, and I have the cassette. I put the cassette in the car, and I had it turned up real loud. And it's me just rattling off these Civil War guys. And, Lincoln and Grant and Lee, and you figure, they'd know these guys. But for whatever reason, I said the name Hooker, and some other guy that wasn't there goes, yes. And I swerved off the road and made up new cuss words, and I just sat there and played that thing over and over and over and over again. It's very clearly a man. That's the best piece of evidence I ever caught. I've now lost the tape, but it was creepy. I mean, because it's very, he sounds like he's right on top of me, and he just goes, yes.
And it's probably he's reacting to that word like it's a woman, like he's got a hooker, right?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe, or maybe he served with Hooker.
Yeah, I would bet. It's very funny because whistling is something that comes out a lot in EVPs. And I always think it's because sometimes it's very hard. In fact, that's a very interesting theoretical question of how they use their vocal cords since they don't have them. And so whistling, I guess you really would not need. That might be a very easy way to communicate. So whistling actually happens a lot. But to whistle to the tune is really present. And one of the best EVPs I ever got was a whole sentence, and it was on that Shack Hack, but it wasn't like, hey, did you hear that? It was like clear, like it almost blocked out the stations, and it was a Civil War soldier. When you do those EVPs, it's like that Hooker thing. You got to hit on something that emotionally that evokes them to have that energy to do that. So That's very interesting. But it's almost like those Civil War. There is something almost stronger about the Civil War areas than most haunted places. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but and like you go to Gettysburg, which I maintain is the most haunted place probably on the planet.
Right.
I mean,
that's where I got that EVP. That's where I got that sentence. Yeah. It was in a one of the bed and breakfasts there where there was supposed to be a soldier that haunted that place.
Yeah. Well, think about this. These guys are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids marching into this wall of gunfire, and they're dead in an instant. They may not even know they're dead. They might still be there from 1863 fighting that battle without knowing that they took a bullet and they're gone. And no one's told them, which is horrific to think about, really. But that's a theory.
And now that I know what 15, I don't know if they were more manly then, but 15 and 16 now, I cannot even, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And they were all young. The life expectancy was like 50. So, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but, they didn't live as long as we did. So they grew up a lot faster, and a lot of these kids that went were raised on farms, and they grew up a lot faster back then.
But they did, and it was weird because they did know how to use guns.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that really was that there was no anti-gun movement then because everybody had them but they all knew how to use them, and they really weren't. I bet you didn't have as many people shooting themselves in the foot or shooting a neighbor. You know what I mean? I'm sure there were some idiots, but that's amazing. Did you? It's funny the things that I once was in a place in South Carolina, and it was a little island, and it was a former place where they kept slaves, and there was a slave house and a master house, and there had been no one there. There wasn't even electricity there. That's how far out we were. And I remember around the master's house, one of the guys saying, "Hey, there's a black president now." And I remember thinking how clever that was, unless you didn't want this guy to send you home. But it's interesting if you realize that you're reaching back through time. So to someone in that day that owned slaves, that must have been like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean?
Yeah. If they can do that you have to shock them from time to time, because I've gone a lot of investigations where we're teaching people how to do this. And when you do the EVPs, they always go talking to the recorder. Well, they don't know what a recorder is. So
right. People forget
tell
that.
them talk at the red light, tell them talk to the red light. But and that's something, I'm a lot into the theories now. I like exploring the theoretical aspects of it, but that's one of them that intrigues me a lot, because if there's an like my house is haunted. I'm sitting in a haunted house tonight, and they're very inactive. They're very sluggish, these ghosts. But when they're active, they're speaking to us. They call my girlfriend's name frequently. And I don't know who they are. So I sometimes wonder, like if I throw in a DVD of like Evil Dead, and they're from like the 1930s, what are they thinking when they see that?
Right. I investigated on a movie set that was a zombie movie, and the girl that was being attacked by zombies actually was Asian, but they had braids in her hair and stuff, and she actually looked like an American Indian would back at that time. And they called us in because they had all these extra people screaming, "Stop it, stop it." And I thought, they think you're attacking one of theirs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you do wonder what they see.
Yeah. Well, you know what they see? If they're watching The Evil Dead with me, you know what they're saying? Bruce Campbell is the baddest motherfucker on the planet. That's what they're saying.
I thought they'd be saying, bad, no script. Who wrote this? The story is...
Hey. We're talking about Bruce Campbell here. Stop it.
Oh, God. You know what else is funny? That's why everyone loved here in L.A. It was Linda Vista Hospital. And Linda Vista Hospital here had been here since the early, 60s, or I know... No, maybe it was actually all the way back. It was a hospital because there was a lot of history to it. But also, it was right in East LA, where there's a lot of gang activity, and a lot of gang members died in that hospital. And it was one of those places where, when it was active, you were talking to ghosts that would recognize a cell phone or a light a recorder. Because I always think, even when we say to a spirit, go to talk into the red light, they didn't have lights like that.
True.
And
I just figure they understand the concept. They see that red thing, talking to that.
Right.
That's easier than going, this is a recorder and it'll record your voice and whatever.
Right.
I don't know. It might be just me being lazy too. So
right. Or, well, you know what else? They may be listening to us. They may be knowing that we're talking into it, that it's not dangerous there. But it is funny, the theories that we have. Like, I always know skeptics will say something like, my friend made a great documentary, and some guy stood up and said, well, if these ghosts are there, why don't they step forward and show themselves? And he didn't quite get... He's like, I don't know. And I am like, how do we know they can do that?
Right.
Maybe they see half of us and they're thinking, why don't those people step forward and show themselves to us? It's such an open open theory, yet when you get something that is so, that's why I think people don't understand when you get a really good EVP or something that has to do. I had one of those, there's a thing called a ghost radar, which is a toy basically, but anything that knows how to use it. In fact, I had a very dark experience with something very bad that knew exactly how to use it. For hours, it was repeating what we were saying, and I was in a abandoned men's prison. Aren't I always in an abandoned men's prison? It seems like in New Jersey. It was the I can't remember.
Aren't I always in New Jersey?
Yes, aren't I always in New Jersey? And there was. We were in a cell. It was a abandoned jail museum, and we're in a cell on the bottom floor. And we had 3 pieces of equipment running, and one went off. It was a what is it? EMF. Boop 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 boop. So we get that. The lights in the whole place went down and came back up, and that little ghost radar put out the word "king" with a capital K. And then we later found out we were in the cell where the warden named King was murdered.
Oh, wow.
So it is funny how they can manipulate really anything. I've had them manipulate radios. I wonder what that looks like on their end.
Well, that's like the movie The Others. I love that concept that somewhere in their world, they're watching us, and some kid is telling their parents, I just saw this guy walked in. It's me. I think that's cool. And there was a meme, and God, I hate memes, but there was a meme that said, it showed like this old house, and it said, my housemates think this place is haunted. I've lived here 274 years and I've never seen a thing.
I know, I love that. I think you tagged me on that the other day, or somebody did. That's a great one. That's great.
I love that idea because it opens up. This is the sci-fi nerd in me, but it opens up the idea of these parallel worlds, and there's a the UFO part of me loves that idea as well. The idea that we've got worlds running alongside of ours and we bleed into each other's worlds. That's cool to me. I don't know why, but I just think it is.
Well, I've been doing a lot of talk with my friend Jessa Reed and stuff like that, also about changing timelines, switching timelines.
Right.
And, I have to do a show on the Mandela effect, because that I think is pretty amazing. That blows my mind.
Yeah, I get my latest things. I'm friends with a lot of guys who write UFO books, and I blame Nick Redfern for my UFO obsession currently, because that's what he does, and I get these books because he's a friend of mine, and I read them, and it's intriguing to me. Are they little UFO alien people? I don't know what they are, but I've seen things in the sky that could be UFOs, and there's a whole lot of that. It borders on New Age ideas, but there's a whole lot of that that's intriguing to me, which is why I don't go investigate haunted places nearly as much as I used to, because I'm wrapped up in. I've done a lot of Bigfooting lately too, so I'm wrapped up in the study, and like I've read all of this John Keel stuff, and that guy was nuts and he was brilliant, and I love him. So it all plays together. That's what Keel talked about, was the Trojan horse. He called it Operation Trojan Horse. There's some higher power, call it God, call it whatever you call it, and it's throwing this stuff at us to distract us from something else, basically. And it all fits together in this bigger puzzle. Now, is that right? Is it wrong? I don't know, but it's an intriguing theory. And a lot of it makes sense when you think about these areas like Hell's Hollow. Hell's Hollow has had UFO sightings. It's had Bigfoot sightings. It's notoriously haunted. Why is it psychics, people that I'm as psychic as a block of wood, but people that go down there that can experience that are unnerved by it. It makes them sick. Somebody told me, I taunt one ghost, and it's one of those guys down there. And I don't tell anybody that I'm doing it, but I do it. And then some lady one night said, there's a ghost down here who hates your guts. I'm like, bring it on, because we've seen him once. And my goal is, I'm 52 years old. I don't know how many years I'll be doing this, but I want to see him again, because we did. He was right there in front of us all and standing there on the path. I'm like, there he is,
Wow.
and I want to see him again. And I think it's because, he's been seen down there for decades. It's not just me. He was murdered in the 1930s, but, I just kind of started teasing him because he was a scumbag, this guy. And yeah, I call a spade a spade. It's you're right. A scumbag.
Did you ever think of asking him if he was from Van Nuys?
I did not, but I will. The next time I'm down there, I will ask, my friend Karen, because
you'll really offend him. Van Nuys, are you kidding?
He'll say, no, man, East LA. Yeah.
So he just must stand there and just grit his teeth at you.
Well, the one time we saw him, now bear in mind, it's changed a lot. It's a bike path. He used to be able to drive down it, but now it's a bike path. And it's out in the woods, and it's, and this guy was murdered down there. He was a caretaker of the cemetery. His name was Mel Savage, which, if that's not a pro wrestling name, I don't know. But it turns out he was like stealing jewelry from corpses, and he was sleeping with all the guys' wives in the neighborhood. He was not a nice guy. And somebody murdered him. And to this day, it remains unsolved. So we tell the story down where it happened. And people walk out of those woods from time to time because, again, a bike path. And we scare them. When you're walking through the woods at night, you don't expect 50 people to be standing there. So we always are on the winning side of those encounters. But this night, I was wrapping up the stories, and the guys that were going to lead them down the path walks off, shines his flashlight down the path, and there stands a guy. And he doesn't move. He doesn't scream. He doesn't do anything. Normally they react in some way. So as I'm wrapping up the stories, I say to the guy that's with us, I said, go down there and see what's up with that guy, because I think there might be a meth head there. So he and another guy walk down there, and he keeps the light on him the entire time. And then suddenly the guy's not there. And everybody's watching this. And then, he didn't turn and run. He didn't step out. He didn't beam up like Captain Kirk. The guy was just gone. And I had 50 people. I turned and said, we're going to walk that way, right? They all went, no, no, we're not. I said, we are, because the bus is at the other end, and I don't know her phone number. So, and I did, but don't tell them that.
Right.
So I said, I'll lead, and that's when I banned flashlights. I don't let them take flashlights when we go down there, because, it just adds. I tell that story, and then I go, come on, let's go.
Yeah,
but
they get their money's worth without that.
Yeah. So then, I believe that was Mel Savage. I don't know that it was, but I think it was. And, historically, that's where he haunts. So it almost has to be him. So I tease him. I don't tease him. I just flat out call him a scumbag, and, see where it falls. So far, nowhere. But,
you should bring a cheap piece of jewelry.
Yeah, that might work. Except he was using that jewelry to woo these women. So I don't know.
I think I'm big on trigger devices, though. I think they really work.
Yeah, I don't know how it would work with him. I don't really know.
He seems pretty in touch with what's going on, but also at that Hell's Hollow, you should get a couple of hats that look like Civil War hats. I bet that would get everybody up.
Well, I've done a lot of stuff out there, that's in the cemetery, which is, Hell's Hollow is part of that and back behind it, but. I've done a lot of stuff up there with the Civil War. In fact, I went up there and read the Gettysburg Address one time and recorded that.
Oh, wow.
Nothing, and got nothing.
It's boring. Just kidding.
It's 2 minutes long. They can listen for 2 minutes. I've done a lot of different things up there, and I've gotten no results other than that one guy just going, yes. But we've gotten odd pictures. I've been there when people have taken pictures that were unexplainable to me. Last year, I believe we had a Bigfoot encounter out there, which was great. It's only happened once during the tours, but we had these coyotes howling in the valley, kind of off to our south, and we're up on the hill, and these coyotes howls are just filling the valley, and then something else starts. I can't even mimic it. It roared and then it calmed down and started to mimic the coyotes.
I played some tape, some Bigfoot tape off of YouTube. So if people listen, they know it's a weird communication.
Yeah, and I'm standing there with 50 people going, they're going to panic, but they didn't. I just told them, I think it's kids. Don't worry about it. You know. But in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this would be wonderful if a Bigfoot charged up the hill, because I don't have to outrun a Bigfoot. I just have to outrun one of them.
Right.
So I'd be fine. I'd be great.
Well, you know that I had a Bigfoot guy on, and he was great. And I was like, yeah, I don't need to see a Bigfoot. Sounds like they're not that friendly.
I don't think they bother you. I've been in their presence. My friend Stan Courtney, you can find him online, Stan Courtney. He's a researcher here, and he's got an area that I'm not going to tell you where it's at, but he's been investigating it forever. And he's found footprints, and he's found a lot of evidence that suggests to him it's there. And he records all the time out there. He puts recorders out all the time and records for days at a time. And we went out there one night and had nothing happen. But as we were walking back, there's a hill. You go up this path, and off to the left, something was walking with us. Something very big was walking through those woods, and it would stop when we stopped, and it would move when we moved. And Stan said, "That's a Bigfoot." Now, I didn't see anything. I heard it. And I said, well, let me bang on a tree, because banging on trees, sometimes that's how they communicate. So let me do that. So I go over and hit this tree and nothing. And we walk a little further, and that thing is walking, whatever it is walking off to the left. And I hit the tree again, and from the right side of the path, something hits back.
Wow.
Now, we were out there randomly, okay? It wasn't like anybody knew we were there. So that happened, and then not long after that, we were out there again, and our friend Laura was with us, and we went to this place where he likes to do that sound blasting, yelling into the megaphone. Woo! So he's doing that. And down at the bottom of the hill, which is a clear path, it's a 35-foot wide clear path down this hill, something is rustling in the trees. And we heard it, and we're like, well, what was that? So he's doing it again, and something grunts. And my initial thought is, do they have wild pigs down here? Because that's kind of what it sounded like. Mm-hmm. But then it did it again. And I'm like, that is not a pig. I'm going down there. And he said, I wouldn't, but me being me, I go down the hill. Laura goes with us. We're about halfway down, and whatever was down there, and I never saw it, but whatever was down there, my theory was I'd flush it out, and it would run across the clearing, and we'd see it. Whatever it was just roared. I mean, like King Kong roar, just roar. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going any further. It took off through the woods. Something went crashing off through the woods. And I'm like, I don't know what that was, but that was not a normal thing. Now, my background, I believe wholeheartedly Bigfoot exists. In those two instances, I believe I was in their presence. I never saw them. And then this night down at the cemetery, we're looking for ghosts, and that happened. So
wow. Well, wouldn't it be funny if there were two Bigfoots and one of them said to the other, "Watch me clear this guy out of here"?
Yeah, that very well could be. 'Cause I just stopped and went. I'm brave, but I'm not stupid.
Right.
So that was loud. I don't know what it was, but that was not like a person. It wasn't that.
Wow. Well, you just made it. So now I have to get in touch with Stan Courtney.
Stan Courtney, I'll get you in touch with Stan. He's
yes, and you gave another name there. I want to talk to that person too.
Nick Redfern?
That's who.
Oh, you don't know Nick?
He's a UFO guy? I need him.
Nick is fascinating. Nick is one of the premier investigators right now of he's big into UFOs, but he does a lot with the Men in Black. He's written definitive books on the Men in Black.
Well, thank you for doing this promo for my next podcast as we speak. But
remind me off air, and I will get you in touch with those guys.
You got it. Well, listen, this hour flew by.
It's already an hour. Okay.
It's already an hour. I know.
There you
John,
go.
I cannot thank you enough. John Winterbauer, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast. He's my Facebook friend. He makes fun of all my jokes, which I appreciate. And it's Haunted Decatur Tours, ladies and gentlemen.
Which is part of American Hauntings Inc. INK.
That's the website.
And you can find all of our tours. We have Decatur, we have Alton, Illinois, we have Springfield, Illinois. We've got I don't know. There's a couple Carlinville. So all of those and all of Troy Taylor's books and all our stuff that we do, our tours and things like that, they're all on there. So American Hauntings Inc. INK. And come see us in October. I'm old. I only do tours in October now. So come see us in Haunted Decatur, Illinois.
AmericanHauntingsInc.com, right?
That's correct.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks, John. Hey, everybody. Leave me 5-star review if you can. Paranormal Karen, karenrontowski.com. You can book a tarot reading. You can follow me at Facebook Card of the Day. Check out my YouTube channel, Paranormal Karen. That's the funny one. And this podcast you can find there if you don't have iTunes. Thank you very much. Thanks to Mike Flynn at Uno Rising Media. And have a good week, folks. We'll see you next Friday.